I'm the youngest in most families. That's a title of affection. In mine, it was a role the invisible one. My older brother, Ethan, an architect, shaped the world with lines and blueprints. My sister, Julia, a lawyer, sculpted it with words and arguments. I just loved breaking things down, exploring the atoms and molecules no one else cared about. I grew up in the silent shadow of their framed diplomas, their graduation photos, and the family parties celebrating their promotions. I never asked to be like them. I just wanted to be seen. But that was the one thing they couldn't see. And then, my 18th birthday arrived. Before I dive into my story, I'd really appreciate it if you could let me know where you're watching from in the comments, and if you'd consider subscribing to my channel. It would mean the world to me and help me keep sharing more stories like this. Thank you so much for being here. I'm Malene, the youngest of four. My childhood was a blur of hand-me-downs and late attention. My sister, Em, is 5 years older than me. My brothers, Jake and Tyler, are 7 and 8 years older. I was always the last one to get anything, if I got it at all. My clothes were Em's, who got them from our cousin. My cell phone and computer were so old by the time they reached me. They were practically museum pieces. My phone screen was cracked for so long, I didn't even notice it anymore. It was a constant reminder of my place in the family hierarchy, a testament to my invisibility. One evening at dinner, I worked up the courage to ask. My mother was serving up a roast, and my father was already absorbed in his newspaper. I took a deep breath. "Mom," I started, pushing my food around my plate. "My laptop keeps shutting down in the middle of my research. Do you think I could get a new one for my birthday?" My father didn't even look up from his plate. "Those things are expensive." "Malene," he said, his voice a flat dismissal. "We can't afford that right now." The words stung, but I was used to it. I pushed the pain down, right next to the worn-out patches on my jeans and the flickering screen of my old phone. The very next weekend, they bought Tyler a brand new gaming laptop because he needed it for his graphic design classes. I stayed silent. It hurt more to be invisible than to use old things. At family dinners, it was always the same. They talked about Jake's perfect score on his engineering project, Em's volleyball team going to the state championship, Tyler's artwork being chosen for the school exhibit. I sat there, a silent observer, pushing food around on my plate, waiting for someone to ask about my day. No one ever did. At parent-teacher conferences, they made a point to show up for my siblings. For me, they only went when the school called to complain about my attendance, not realizing I had already found my passion, my sanctuary, from my very first chemistry class. I was captivated, the way elements combined to create something new. It felt like magic, but with a scientific explanation. I joined every club, participated in every competition, and won medals. The lab became my sanctuary. "Malene, your solution to this problem was so creative," Professor Roberts said after I won first place at the regional science fair. Have you ever considered studying chemistry in college?" The question echoed what was already in my heart. I was already thinking about it all the time. I even ran my own small experiments in my room, buying simple kits with money I saved from babysitting. One day, I was testing an innocuous reaction that released a sulfurous smell. My mother knocked on my door, her voice sharp with annoyance. "Malene, what is that smell? Open this door right now." I sighed and opened it. "This has to stop," she said, holding her nose. "The whole house stinks. What if your father brings clients here?" Tyler walked by laughing. "The little sister is cooking drugs. Huh, should we call the police?" "Shut up, Tyler," I muttered. "Don't you talk to your brother like that." My mother snapped, "And clean this up now." Her words were a physical blow, a confirmation that my passion was nothing more than an inconvenience. That's when I started taking my experiments to my Grandma Ruth's house. Unlike my parents, she was genuinely interested in what I was doing. "Tell me about this one," she would say, looking over my shoulder as I carefully measured solutions. Her kitchen table became my laboratory. She would spend hours with me, asking questions, helping me jot down results. She was the only one who truly saw me. the only one who didn't dismiss my dreams as smelly or weird. By my senior year of high school, I had a clear plan: graduate with good grades, get into a chemistry program, and one day, work in a real lab. I had seen how my parents helped my siblings with college. They took out loans, applied for scholarships, and even dipped into their retirement savings for Jake and Tyler. Em had a partial athletic scholarship, but my parents paid for the rest. So, when I sat down with them to tell them I'd been accepted to state college, I didn't expect the response I got. I held the acceptance letter in my hands, a fragile piece of hope. College? My father seemed genuinely confused. I didn't even think you wanted to go. What do you mean, why wouldn't I want to go to college? I asked. A tremor in my voice. My mother shrugged. You never talked about it much. We thought maybe you'd just get a job after school. I've been talking about being a chemist since my freshman year. I won state competitions. How could you not know that? I said, the words tumbling out in a rush of disbelief. My parents exchanged glances, a silent conversation I couldn't understand. Chemistry, my mother said, her voice laced with skepticism. Do you even know what that means? I couldn't believe it. All those years, my medals on the wall, my weekend experiments at Grandma's. Had they ever paid attention? My father spoke in a calm voice, as if explaining to a child. Look, Malene, we've already spent so much on your siblings. College is expensive. We don't have anything left for you. Those words hit me like a punch. We don't have anything left for you. The story of my life, summed up in 6 perfect words. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. Something inside me just hardened in that moment. I had counted on their help, but I realized I should have known better. Fine, I said, standing up from the table. I'll figure it out on my own. And I did. I secured a partial scholarship for my grades. It wasn't enough, but it was a start. The next day, I got a job at a coffee shop. The day after that, I asked Grandma if I could move in with her after graduation. The transition from high school to college wasn't easy. I packed my few belongings and moved into Grandma Ruth's spare room. My coffee shop job paid minimum wage, but every cent went into my college fund. I took double shifts whenever I could, coming home with aching feet and the persistent smell of coffee on me. Grandma never complained about me being there, even when I turned her dining room into an impromptu study space. On many nights, she would bring me tea while I was hunched over my books, gently urging me to rest. When the fall semester started, the reality hit hard. While other freshmen were going to orientation parties and decorating their dorm rooms, I was calculating how many hours I needed to work to afford my books for the next semester. My partial scholarship covered 60% of my tuition, but there was still a significant gap. After the first week of classes, I knew I needed another source of income. The coffee shop job wouldn't be enough. With my class schedule in hand, I went to talk to Professor Larson, my general chemistry professor, after class. Professor, I said, are there any work-study positions available in the department? He looked at me over his glasses. Perhaps. What's your experience? I told him about the chemistry competitions I'd participated in during high school and the projects I did on my own. His face shifted from polite interest to genuine curiosity. Stop by my office tomorrow. I might have something for you. The next day, he offered me 2 part-time jobs, one as a lab assistant, helping to prepare materials for chemistry classes, and another organizing books in the science library. Between classes, these jobs, and some weekend shifts at the coffee shop. I barely had time to sleep. But for the first time, I felt like I was building something for myself. Grandma's apartment became my sanctuary. She always left dinner for me to heat up, no matter what time I came home. Sometimes I would find little notes from her. Don't forget to breathe. Malene, I'm so proud of you. These notes gave me strength on the most difficult days, despite my exhaustion. I threw myself into my studies. Chemistry was no longer just an interest. It was my future, my way out, my proof that I was more than my family believed. I studied during lunch, read books on the bus, and did exercises late into the night. Professor Larson noticed my dedication. He started giving me more challenging assignments and even invited me to sit in on advanced classes. One day after the lab, he stopped me. "There's a student research conference next semester. I think you should present a project." The idea was both terrifying and exhilarating. "What kind of project?" I asked. "Something original. Something you're truly interested in," he said, handing me a stack of scientific journals. "Start reading. Look for gaps, questions no one has answered yet." I spent weeks immersed in articles, scribbling ideas in notebooks. In the end, I decided to research a new catalytic method for breaking down certain pharmaceutical compounds in water, something with a practical application that used my strengths. The following months became a blur of classes, work, and research. I would get back to Grandma's apartment after midnight, my eyes burning from hours in the lab. Slowly, my project took shape. The initial results were promising, showing more efficiency than existing methods. When I presented my findings at the Freshman Research Symposium, I was nervous but prepared. I knew my data inside and out. What I didn't expect was the reaction. "Extraordinary work for a freshman," one professor commented. "Where did you learn these techniques?" another asked. Then the department head pulled me aside. "Moline, it's not common to see this level of sophistication in an undergraduate. Would you be interested in presenting at the regional conference next month?" I accepted on the spot, even though I had no idea how I would fit more work into my impossible schedule. Somehow, I managed. The regional conference was larger, more intimidating, filled with graduate students and a few professors presenting. I was by far the youngest one there. My presentation wasn't perfect. My voice trembled at the beginning, and I fumbled a slide transition. But the content was solid. When I finished, the questions came fast. I answered each one with clarity and confidence, even when a skeptical researcher tried to challenge me. Afterward, a woman approached me. "I'm Dr. Helena Riviera from Eastridge University." That was an impressive body of work. Eastridge, an Ivy League school. My heart pounded. "Thank you," I managed to say. "I'd like to talk about your future plans," she said, handing me her card. "I'm interested in learning more about your research." I didn't tell my parents any of this. They hadn't called once since I left home, not even to see if I was alive. Sometimes I would see social media posts about family dinners or celebrations I hadn't been invited to. It hurt, but less than it used to. As my freshman year progressed, my project grew. Professor Larson gave me more lab time, more resources. He even started introducing me to colleagues as our rising star. I wasn't used to this kind of recognition, to actually being seen. When the spring semester ended, I had a 4.0 GPA, a growing research portfolio, and an invitation to work in Professor Larson's lab over the summer. I also received a notification from the dean's office. I had earned an additional merit scholarship for my sophomore year. Things were finally looking up until the call that changed everything. I was washing glassware in the lab when my phone rang. It was Dr. Riviera from Eastridge. "Moline, I've been following your work. We have a special transfer program for exceptional students. Full scholarship starting your sophomore year. You would work directly with our research professors." I told her I needed time to think. When I hung up, I sat down on a lab bench. My mind was reeling. Eastridge was the opportunity of a lifetime. A full scholarship. Research with top scientists. The kind of education my siblings had gotten without a second thought. The kind my parents had told me was too much for me. When I told Professor Larson about the offer, I thought he would be disappointed. But instead, he broke into a huge grin. "You'd be a fool not to take it, Moline. This is what you've worked so hard for." That night, I told Grandma the news over dinner. She held my hand tightly, her eyes shining. "Your grandfather always said the cream rises to the top. He would be so proud of you right now." 2 weeks later, I accepted Eastridge's offer. As I packed my belongings again, I realized I hadn't told my parents any of this. They didn't know about my research, my scholarship, or my transfer, and I no longer needed their approval. Eastridge University was everything I had dreamed of and more. The campus was spread across manicured lawns and historic buildings. The chemistry department had equipment I had only seen in scientific journals. My scholarship-subsidized apartment was small but modern, the first place that was truly mine. The work was demanding. As a transfer student, I had to run to catch up with Eastridge's rigorous level. I spent almost my entire first semester buried in books, determined not to waste this chance. My classmates came from elite prep schools. Their parents were doctors, lawyers, and professors. I preferred to keep my past to myself, giving vague answers to personal questions. The highlight of my time at Eastridge was working with Professor Nathan Harris. He had been nominated for the Nobel Prize twice for his groundbreaking work in chemical catalysis. When I first entered his lab, I was so nervous I could barely speak. "You must be Malene," he said, not looking up from his microscope. "Helena says you have an exceptional talent. Show me." Professor Harris was demanding but fair. He pushed me like no one ever had, critiquing my techniques, questioning my ideas, and making me start over multiple times. But under his guidance, my research evolved from a simple undergraduate project into something truly innovative. By my junior year, I had co-authored 2 papers in respected journals. I presented my work at conferences around the country, and even at an international symposium in Berlin. Each achievement was another step, moving me further away from the invisible girl I used to be. Grandma Ruth remained my only link to the past. We talked every week, and I flew her out to visit me twice a year. She proudly displayed my pictures in my lab coat on her living room sideboard, even though she promised not to tell my parents any of this. At the beginning of my senior year, I received an unexpected email from the university's communications department. A science reporter from National Public Television wanted to feature my research on a show about young scientists. The producer had read my latest paper and thought it would make a good TV segment. My first reaction was to decline. I had spent years working quietly, not drawing attention to myself, just focusing on my work. Public appearances were never part of my plan, but Professor Harris convinced me to reconsider. "Science isn't just about the lab and the papers," he said. "It's also about inspiring the next generation. Think about the little girl who might be watching and see herself in you." The camera crew spent 3 days with me on campus, filming me in the lab, mentoring students, and talking about my research. They also interviewed Professor Harris, who called me one of the most promising young minds in chemistry today. They even filmed me receiving the Rocks for Young Scientists Award, a major national honor I had only told Grandma about. The program aired on a Tuesday night. I watched it alone in my apartment. It was surreal to see myself on national television. The reporter described me as a rising star in chemistry who had already made significant contributions to pharmaceutical waste treatment. They showed clips of my presentations, published articles, and testimonials from my professors and colleagues. As soon as it was over, I turned my phone off. I knew what would happen next. I was right. The next day, when I checked, there was a message from an unknown number. It was my mother, Malene. "We saw you on TV last night. Your father and I are so proud. We always believed in you. Call us. We miss you." I stared at that message for a long time. 3 years of silence. Now they were proud. Now they missed me. I deleted it without responding. In the following days, the messages only increased. My sister Em sent a long email saying the family felt incomplete without me. Jake sent an awkward text, congratulating me and asking if I could help his daughter with her science fair project. Tyler simply tagged me in a post. That's my little sister. I ignored them all. The final straw came a week later when I posted pictures from my graduation. Grandma Ruth was by my side, smiling as I held my diploma. Within a few hours, the post was flooded with comments from relatives I barely remembered. "We're so proud of you. Our family genius. You are making us all look good." My mother's comment was the worst. "This is what happens when you have parents who support your dreams. So proud of our girl." The audacity took my breath away. I almost threw my phone. Instead, I wrote a simple announcement. "Graduation party at my place this Saturday. It's going to be amazing." I didn't include the address. Minutes later, my phone rang. It was my mother, Malene. "We are so excited about your party. What's the address? We need to book our flights." I took a deep breath. "You're not invited." There was a long pause. What? Don't be ridiculous. We're your family. My family. You refused to help me with my education. You told me I had no future. You didn't even know what I was studying until you saw me on TV. That's not fair. We always supported you. Everything we did was for our children. 3 children. No. 4. How can you say that we made you who you are? The laugh that escaped me was not a pleasant sound. No. Mom, I made myself who I am, in spite of you, not because of you. That's ridiculous after everything we've done. You've done nothing, and now you want to claim my success. No, you don't get to show up at the finish line and pretend you ran the race. I hung up before she could respond. Then I turned my phone off again and went back to preparing for my true celebration with the people who were actually there for me on this journey. The day of my graduation party arrived with perfect weather. I rented a small hall overlooking a simple, tasteful garden. Grandma Ruth arrived early to help set up, hugging me tightly when she saw the decorations. By 6 p.m., the space was filled with friends and colleagues I had made over the years. Professor Harris showed up with his wife and a bottle of champagne. My first-year roommate from Eastridge brought her fiancé, even Dr. Riviera, who first recruited me, made an appearance. We were about 20 people in total, a small but genuine gathering. People who knew the real me, not just the scientist from TV. My phone vibrated all day with messages from my family. My siblings were outraged they had been left out. Distant relatives I barely remembered were arguing on social media. Taking sides. I ignored it all. This day was not about them. During dinner, Professor Harris raised his glass and tapped it with his spoon, calling for silence. I've been teaching for over 30 years, he began. In that time, I've had thousands of students. Some are brilliant, some are hardworking, some are creative. But it's rare to find all 3 in one person. He turned to me. Malene, you are that rare combination. But what impresses me most about you is your resilience. Science is about failing, failing better, failing forward, until suddenly, you're not failing anymore. You're discovering. He raised his glass. It's my great pleasure to announce that Malene will be joining our research staff next semester as a research associate in my lab. The room erupted in applause. I swallowed back tears as I accepted congratulations. A job offer in Professor Harris's lab was something postdocs from all over the country fought for. I had known it might happen, but to hear the announcement made it all real. The party was winding down when I saw Professor Harris talking to someone at the door. He looked at me and motioned for me to come over. There's someone here to see you, he said in a low voice. My heart dropped. I thought it was my parents or my siblings. But to my surprise, it was my cousin Eli, who I hadn't seen in years. I hope it's not a problem that I came, she said, a little shyly. I saw your stuff online, and I just wanted to tell you in person how amazing all of this is. I hugged her, genuinely happy to see a familiar face that wanted nothing from me but to share the moment. After the party, I went back to my apartment, exhausted but content. The next morning, there were more messages on my phone, but one caught my attention. It was from Professor Harris. My office, 11 a.m. Important matter. When I arrived, he seemed uncomfortable, which was unusual. Your parents came looking for me this morning, he said. My stomach sank. What? They showed up at the lab without warning. They wanted to talk about you. They said they couldn't get in touch with you directly. I closed my eyes, mortified. I'm so sorry. I had no idea they would do that. He held up a hand. You don't need to apologize. I just told them I don't discuss my researchers with anyone without their consent. He paused. They seemed desperate. Desperate for the wrong reasons, I said. 2 days later, they appeared at my work. I was cataloging samples when the receptionist buzzed me to say I had visitors. I thought about sending them away, but decided it was time to face them. My mother looked older than I remembered, and my father was more quiet. They stood in the reception area, uncomfortable, dressed too formally for a research environment. Malene, my mother said, stepping forward as if to hug me. I stayed still. What are you doing here? I asked. My father cleared his throat. We need to talk privately, if possible. I led them to a small conference room and closed the door. Say what you came to say. They exchanged glances before my mother began to speak. We're in some financial trouble. The mortgage, some medical bills. Your brothers and your sister are also struggling to support their own families. I prompted, already knowing where this was going. You're doing so well, my father said. That award they mentioned on TV. We looked it up, and we saw it comes with a nice amount of money. Their audacity was almost impressive. So you came to ask for money? Not to ask for money, my mother protested. Family helps family. Now that you're successful. I laughed, a humorless sound. I wasn't family when I needed money for college. I wasn't family when I was working 3 jobs to survive. I wasn't family for the 3 years you didn't call or write. This isn't fair, my mother insisted. My father agreed. It's not fair. He was right. None of it had been fair. But I was no longer interested in fairness. I was interested in peace. And peace for me meant a life without them in it. My mother started to cry. The same old tears. The ones that used to manipulate me as a child. How can you be so cold? We raised you. You housed me, I corrected. Grandma Ruth raised me. Professor Harris mentored me. I built myself. I stood up, signaling that the conversation was over. I don't owe you anything, not money, not forgiveness, not a relationship. Please don't contact me again. I walked out of the room, leaving them sitting there. It might have been cruel, but it was honest. They didn't come because they loved me or because they were proud of me. They came because they wanted something from me. Some things never change. Today, my work in the lab continues to grow. I recently put a down payment on a small house with the help of a grant program for young scientists. My research has expanded into new areas with promising applications in environmental remediation. Grandma Ruth visits me often. A few of my cousins have also reached out. They are relationships I am rebuilding, but on my own terms this time. As for my parents and siblings, I don't know how they are. And I don't need to.